специалист.
Да, ему надо ниже, он ниже меня.
Все, сейчас позвоню.
Эй. Эй.
Ниже. Идите. Хотите, вы присядьте.
Нет.
Эй.
Вот он ниже меня. Я при этом
Не работает. Нет. Нет.
Могу вообще убрать?
пожалейте.
Эй.
конце выведу, они Да, коллеги, там сейчас ряд сессий затянулось, но уже, я смотрю, и Федеральная налоговая служба вышла только что.
Dear colleagues, another session seems to be delaying, and we're waiting for people from the Federal Customs Service, Federal Tax Services, but still our format today is that we cannot wait for long. We have to start more or less on time, because many of our distinguished speakers will have to go back to their cities or to move to a different event. So I propose to begin, and people will join us as we go. Our topic today is how to give a new impetus to development of the SME, small and medium enterprises. I would like to introduce to you our panel. Elena Ovsyanova, the head of the Department of the Investment Policy, Ministry of Economics, of the Ministry of Economics and Development of the Russian Federation. You recently became the head of this department, so we are pinning big hopes on that. And we believe that in big strokes, you'll be able to give us perspectives for the point of growth for the SMEs. Maxim Lyubomudrov, the deputy head of the State Corporation for Development of the SMEs. And Maxim is in charge of a very important block, which is the finance availability for business, which is one of the major problems for small companies in Russia. Yevgeny Bogdanov, deputy head of the government of the Novgorod region of Russia. The Novgorod region was headed recently by Andrei Nikitin, the person who has basically launched doing business movement in Russia. Prior to that, he was head of the Agency for Strategic Initiatives, and I believe that the Novgorod experience will be of value for us. Next is Vyacheslav Zhilin, the head of the Zlatoustovsky city districts. He is a Skolkovo graduate. He will share about how the small business is developing in municipalities and what can be expected from the standpoint of a mayor of the city. And what are those breakthrough points for the Russian entrepreneurs in terms of building investment activities in municipality. Vyacheslav Fedorishin, the deputy head of the deputy governor of the Tula region. Is he here yet? No. No, he'll be the front row speaker. Next is Timur Aymaledinov, director for research for NAFI Analytical Center. And later, I will ask you to share your perspectives, perspectives of analysts at the current situation in Russia. And we do have with us some experts, Yelena Dybova in the first row, the vice president of the Chamber of Trade and Commerce, and she is in charge of this topic in the system of the chambers of commerce. And she also has this small manufacturing company herself. And her outstanding videos about the public procurement systems in the Russian Federation, we've seen that. Dear colleagues, shall we begin? Frankly, I want us to not to analyze so much those proposals which we've heard and those proposals that have been adopted. Let's speak about the future and what the future holds and why small business on one hand. We can see the big developments in small business in the last years in Russia. You cannot deny that the input in the GDP of Russia in 4 years has grown from 18% to 22% by the SMEs, and maybe even more by the results of 2018. It's a fact that the number of small companies in Russia in the last 3 years since the launch of the new methodology, which has never been before, the new registry, and the number of SMEs has grown in Russia by 7 to 8%. It also cannot be denied. So we definitely have a trend. And I also want to remind you that back in 2014 and 15, the contribution to the GDP and the number of the companies in Russia was decreasing. Not only have we changed the trend, but we also achieved certain positive dynamics. But those goals which have been outlined in the executive order of the president, 25 million people employed instead of 19 million people of employed. We have to move it to the 40%. I mean, SME 40% instead of 26% in the total economy. They require systemic and extraordinary steps, which we are devising. Who can give these steps? Only those people who have worked in this business for a long time, or those people who know how the small and medium companies are working. The heads of the ministries, the people who are dealing with entrepreneurial community, they know what they're lacking, what they are concerned about. So here with us, we have financial institutions. We have the vice president of the Promsvязьbank. We also have with us other experts. Dear colleagues, I would like to ask the first question to Milena Aslanova, Director of the Department of Investment Policies, Ministry of Economic Development. Back on Friday, in the central apparatus of the government, there'll be a special discussion of the national project for the SMEs. Now, this project has to be adopted and start working in October 2018. Have you been able to identify any breakthrough ideas or what you will be placing your bet on, so to speak? Yes, on Friday we're going to discuss not on the session of the government, it will be another intermediate session. Today we have the video conferencing with the Russian regions. We do them basically daily. Yesterday there was a subcommittee chaired by the Mr. Siluanov in the Presidium where we are going to approve the passport. Will take place on the 17th. Yes, the document is very close in its final edition. We have been working with the Russian regions, with the business associations and communities. Some changes will be after the project committee, which has taken place yesterday. We are still expecting the sub-chapter to give SMEs better access to the borrowed money. But conceptually, this project accumulates all the ideas that we have today. It's a systemic approach to solving this problem. While previously we've had a problem of Ministry of Economics and regional programs and departmental programs, now we systematize all of this at one platform of the All-Russian National Project. This national project reflects all the goals which have been outlined by the executive decree of the president and also complements it in terms of popularizing this project. This is the element without which it would be impossible to achieve the indicators stated in presidential decree. Alexander, you will be the head of this line of business. It's very interesting. And it includes a quite targeted approach. We will build the metrics of the special purpose groups, and we will be very systemic about building the image and identifying and involving entrepreneurial people in Russia. As for the other novelties, we have strengthened the program for subsidized lending. I believe that our colleagues will share about this a bit later. We are continuing those tools and instruments which have been launched in the last autumn, namely acceleration tools, industrial parks, my business centers, which are showing very good synergetic effects when the development and support institutions at one platform unite, and when entrepreneurs come to the single-stop shop, so to speak, they can see all the institutions in one location. It's a co-working, it's educational courses, like a palace, like a hub for entrepreneurs. For entrepreneurial community. Another approach which had not been implemented prior to today. My business is like an offline version of the single shop window or a single stop window. It will be a digital space which will include all the platforms, digital platforms, which have already been established or will be created in the future. We are planning B2B, B2C, B2G platforms to unite by transitions to include all the platforms such as educational, business navigation, so that we could create this system. Entrepreneurs using their login and password, they get into digital space and they're moving between these platforms and sites, and they can see all the sales or all the platforms where they can register and with this initial password or login. But what is interesting, by being in any city, in any location, entrepreneurs can get an information about the certain opportunities which have been posted at these websites. That's it, I guess, and other instruments will be developed in the future, into the future. And colleagues, correct me if I'm wrong. I think I've basically covered the basics. Agriculture. Cooperatives in agriculture, it's not a new story, but it will be given significant support and very intensive development. Definitely, we will have it. I also would like to point out that, of course, we haven't had this approach before. First of all, I believe about $500 billion Russian rubles will be allocated within 6 years for support of the small and medium businesses, which is unprecedented. And the huge bulk of this money will be spent for acceleration, including financial support. And as for financial products, also the record-breaking amount of money will be allocated, I think, up to 50 billion a year, or something along these lines. And plus, there is a personal responsibility. The national project will be headed by the first vice prime minister, and Ministry of Economics will be Maxim Oreshkin will be responsible, and there will be 4 modules, 4 blocks. Number 1 will be the terms and conditions of entrepreneurship, so-called the entrepreneurial climate, which is the Ministry of Economics is responsible for. Second block, acceleration, which includes money, industrial parks, digital platform. It will be a state corporation responsible for it, Mr. Alexander Braverman. Yesterday we had a conversation with him. No. The structure has been identified in terms of aggregating this approach that is combining. But as for acceleration at the digital platforms, it's a deputy ministry. But let's wait for the final version first. Ministry of Agriculture will be responsible for the development of farmers, community, cooperatives, and business unions will be popularizing it, promoting it. I believe this is the right approach because together, the Port of Russia, Russian Support for Russia, the Russian Chamber of Industry and Commerce, Russian Union of Industrials and Entrepreneurs, we've been speaking about it for a long time. Without promoting, there'll be new forms, there'll be no new ideas, and our younger generation will be basically looking at such lucrative and more stable activities as the public administration, public service, as they believe. But in fact, the small business opens up the unlimited opportunity for the women and young people to uncover their potential. Those who are in their households, people who are decommissioned from the military services and others, when they can become entrepreneurs. And I would like maybe Yelena Dybova to comment from your point of view. You have extensive experience as the businesswoman, as the head of the Chamber of Trade and Commerce. Maybe it's the same, but has been repackaged. I don't know. Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me. Frankly speaking, the first thing that I would like to point out that finally, for the first time, we have integrated approach, because previously we have been saying that it doesn't matter how you rotate these chess figures on the board. If you don't understand the game, it doesn't really matter. The whole system of business support in Russia sometimes would remind a fragmented approach. You see, there was an endlessly we have been speaking about supporting small business, and the fact that we have not too many people in the audience today, it's not because the topic is not interesting. Simply, people are simply well aware of what we will be speaking about. It's all, people are sick of that. But speaking of Russian regions, speaking of the breakthroughs, speaking of the pivots and turns, it didn't happen. We've been trying to analyze why this is the case, and I believe now, to a certain degree, we see that we'll be able to move the grounds, because for the first time we are speaking about popularizing this topic. We have to promote it because we need a positive image. For the first time, We are seeing of how to build regional and other stories, although I know that our panelists and those who are from the regions may correct me. But you know, the problem, the deeper problem, still remains. Yesterday I got a phone call from one business person, an expert member of the... He has been crying. He's been in business for 22 years. We are speaking about digitalization. He said, my company has been in the market for 22 years. The tax office sent me a message back in May to my address of my registration. But I do not have an agreement with Russian Postal Service. I decided to save this little bit of money. Nobody's sending emails. Only Russian tax authorities are sending post offices. The company was put on a stop list, and the company was to be excluded from the registry. You know what they do? This lady, she quit everything. She changed her address to be moved to the previous address so the tax authorities would not punch or nip her. She said, I spent 3 days. Why did you send me this letter by mail? And this is now, the cases like that, the stories like that are still beyond our scope, because we're looking into the future. But these existing problems, day-to-day stabbing on the back of entrepreneurs, and they do not know how to deal with that. This is what is stopping and really slowing down Russian businessmen. You want to fly high, you want to go into the future. We're speaking about the new digital economy. But when we look down to our feet, we can see endless checks, endless commissions, endless reports, a lot of mess with the Russian tax authorities. They're making all kind of inspections. Now they're doing it every second week. They send more and more letters. This routine is killing the business. It does not enable it to make a breakthrough. I believe that now we're going to speak about the top level problems, but then we will start working from the bottom. May I continue on what you just said?
In the federal project about this climate, and specifically for that matter, you see that there were not so many normative acts. Why? Because we do understand that business has to make face to quite a number of different constraints. They are numerous, both at the regional and the federal level. And we, being a separate autonomous event, we decided to prescribe some business climate, this kind of mechanism that should work as a vacuum cleaner for the legislative field, and to remove all the possible constraints in order to eliminate them completely. This is quite a large-scale project that was initiated back in spring by the government, so it's aimed at specifically that thing. There we tackle different legal aspects. We work with administrative barriers. We also work with some technical and excessive requirements that date back to the Soviet times, a whole complex of constraints or barriers that we have to make face to on a regular basis every day, that the business has to make face to. So they actually have to overcome a big number of different barriers. It's really great to know that the Ministry for Economic Development is also responsible for that, because you have a special plan of strategic initiative both for the public organizations and also corporations. So we are going to be directly involved in that. Like, for example, Vice President of Pромsvязьbank is also here. Colleagues, do you know that when we give you a credit of 300,000, then the bank actually has to store all the paperwork for 3 years? Can you imagine how many storages we're supposed to have all around Russia to do that, in order to store tens of millions of papers? What for? Since Yelena is talking about digital economy, but what do we do it for? It's all about credits. When you get a credit with a 15% rate, you know that this is actually based on certain requirements that they need to install this storage and also keep those papers there for like this amount of years. But anyway, of course, we will integrate this block in the project. Maxim Lubomorov, Deputy Director of the Federal Corporation for Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise Development. I think that you will be responsible for the most money-oriented block, acceleration. It's also about access to the finance and also digital platforms, etc. Alexander Sergeyevich, no. You're talking about finance, yes. So the central bank yesterday stated its position, which I think was a little bit kind of a surprise as part of our discussion. But anyway, it's up to them to decide within the government. It's up to you to decide who is going to be the leader. But we support you anyway. They have a number of different initiatives within one single chain. They want to simplify the regulation mechanism, and they found quite a solution. But they admitted it to be a problem, and we need to push it a little bit in order to render the very right solution more concrete and more down to earth from the concept of the bank. As for the financial component of that, I'm not going to dig deeper into any connects industries, etc. But I think that the key change, of course, lies within the scale of this deal. Recently, we have done a lot. We have tried a lot, tried new approaches. So, in general, based on the result of last year and also preference finance, specifically for small and medium-sized enterprises, actually amounted to 258 billion ruble, according again to the statistics, and also with support of the special crediting system through accredited banks, bank partners, etc. So right now, the privileged financing for the period of 6 years should be no less than a trillion ruble on an annual basis. So it's 4.5 times more than it used to be, and of course it will exercise a certain pressure on the system in general. We do understand that banks have their own priorities and rates they might vary, but if we identify those economy sectors who are absolutely critical for economic development and that actually generate jobs, etc., and to move technologies move further, as well as the production sector and innovations, then of course we should do everything we can to provide some preference rates in order to make enterprises feel and see some opportunities to get less expensive credits. The scale itself says a lot about the attitude towards the passports, towards the dynamics of the process that we want to have in the near future. The next point, or another very important novelty, is that we want to talk not only about credits, but of course credits is the basic financial instrument, and it will remain like that to be in the near future. But we also need to talk about some digital aspects for small and medium-sized enterprises. We have been working with regional leasing companies. They were subsidized by the government, and also together with the Ministry for Economic Development, Tatarstan, Bashkortostan, Yakutia, and Yaroslav region. There were locations for that very project. So it's very important for us to finalize all the startup and commissioning works at decent interest rates, but this is specifically for the companies and with an equipment that should be focused and used within this project. There we talk about transport and many other sectors. Again, it's a very considerable factoring sector for different companies, both for manufacturers and also vendors, etc. We do understand that it's not always possible to receive all the payments on time, but probably we need just to scale the operations of some financial organizations, and it should be done also together with the state. We created a mechanism, but it needs to be scaled a little bit. To do that, we should focus more on capitalization with participation of all the companies. Crowdfunding is a brand new platform, something absolutely new, but it already has proven to be a success. It does really work. But as for SMEs, and if we refer to them as entities, we can say that this is a real form of finances that allows the government to attract some funds from the private investors and also generates great projects. This is the innovative side of this approach, something that can really allows us to invest into that kind of projects. And then the next thing, of course, I want to refer to is digitization. We apparently can see it within the banking sector, the way they regulate different procedures based on digitization. And we can see that they really want to summarize the whole data that we have about credits, etc., based on the relevant technologies. It could give us a lot from the point of view of financial support. Right now we have a big number of different systems that are mostly about crediting, financing, etc. So all these systems have personal cabinet for and accounts for all the users. So they accumulate data about them with all the historical feedback, etc. It needs to be accumulated. The system that we already have based on MSP Bank, it's already presented in 17 different systems. So you can download any data about any businessman. So once you have the taxpayer's individual number, you can get any information you want. As for big banks, you can see, of course, they have massive information about all the banking accounts. All this information, if possible, should be united and lumped together as one cluster or one bundle, so that investment companies can make their proposals based on that information as well. We don't want to force entrepreneurs to work with every single financial institute or every single request. Instead, we could use some common database to generate some offers and apply for assistance to a whole variety of different institutes at the same time, and to receive some offers for this or that financial instruments, and to process all the possible requests very quickly. So again, it helps to speed up the process, and of course, inevitably, it will lead to a bigger number of approvals for finance requests, etc. And if we manage to double it, then we will be talking about colossal, enormous, huge figures. But it's only the matter of qualification, but also it's also the matter of data processing quality. In general, the financial support is one of our priorities, but it can only work if we take a comprehensive approach to that. Entrepreneurs quite often know that they don't only need to get some finance, but they need to, to be more mature, to really understand that they are ready to receive those means and can comply with all the requirements regarding data availability and also provision of the data about them. Only upon this provision we can really do what it takes to achieve our ultimate goal. But we already have set the right pace, and I think that we will manage to increase this number by 4 times. I think that is a very good performance indicator. What I have just heard and what I have just seen is more or less, as far as I know, right now we have like 40 billion rubles that were allocated for subsidized crediting. As far as I know, this figure should amount more 1 trillion next year, and even 6 trillion if we talk about the big portfolio. No, I would like to clarify it. Last year, as for portfolio, it was 4.3 and a bit over 6 for the total portfolio. If we talk about the dynamics for the beginning of this year, according to one of the programs where we talked about subsidized rates, there we have 44 billion, and we have another 4 months to finalize this figure. But as for the stimulating and subsidizing program in general, we can talk about 30 billion at least. So we will exceed the design figure, targeted figure, by 100 billion minimum. Sums are really impressing, but we're still working on that. And correct me if I'm wrong, yes, so it means 10 times more. Colleagues, we do hope that a small and medium size will receive over 1 trillion ruble next year at a lower rate than it is now. This is one of our goals, and relevant funds were allocated for that matter, as well as instruments. It will be monitored by the Cooperation for SMEs, and it can lead to the following thing. It can actually force banks to lower their interest rates as well. Otherwise, they will no longer be competitive within this space. And I would like to give the floor to the Vice President of Pромsvest Banks. Don't you think that it's a little bit fantastic, or is it feasible, in fact? Can it be confirmed by the project anyhow? And introduce yourself, please. My name is Tikhinov Kirill. I'm Vice President of Provsvest Bank, and I'm responsible for SMEs. In fact, I would have called it fantastic 15 years ago. But what I see now, and judging from the situation that we have right now, I can say that this is really something feasible. A lot of funds allocated either with the help of different corporations or the state, etc. It's also important for the banks because we can share our risks with the state. Of course, we are trying to conduct high-quality expertise to make sure that our portfolio is of high quality. It's very important from the point of view of entrepreneurship, but I don't think that this is like, a fairy tale or something not really attainable. I think that we can do that on our part. We also are ready to get involved to form our proposals. Right now, for example, we want to use different tools to speed up, for example, the decision-making process, etc. At the same time, we are already enjoying considerable sums of money, and we can see that the portfolio is growing day by day. Speaking about my personal experience, I should say that we are talking about a very clear and concrete tool, because the bank is the only one responsible for funds allocation, and at the same time the funds allocated from the states. So all the risks are borne by the bank, and as soon as the decision is taken, as soon as all the risks have been estimated, then we make sure that the customer fully comply with all the requirements, and that it falls within the term SMEs, and then we just can use those funds for the purpose of SMEs, and it's just a matter of 1 trillion ruble. Right now we're talking about 80%, but considering the inflation rate and considering what is actually going to happen within the financial markets soon, then of course that is going to be the very right figure. We are going to have relatively cheap money. Another issue is where it should be directed for SMEs. Here, regional policy and regional players give us the clusters where those funds should be concentrated. Not long ago, I was interviewed, and I said that some Moscow clusters gave 2-digit gross figures, and I would like to give the floor to Mr. Bogdanov, Deputy Head of the Novgorod region. How can we help the entrepreneurs not to make a mistake on one hand, but at the same time to open some new distribution markets for them? What do you do within the Nizhny Novgorod region? Good morning, colleagues. First of all, I would like to say a few words about general vision. I've been in business for 15 years, and now I work as an official. Still, I know a lot about business. We should simplify all those terms for the entrepreneurs to make sure that it's absolutely easy for them to enter this atmosphere, also to communicate with monitoring entities. But I would like to switch to the regional level and say a few words about the common problems.
Well, first, if not about the problems, but about the question asked by Alexander, yes, we've identified priorities for small businesses where we're going to help them to stimulate them, but there are some problems, and I would like to share about a couple of them. Yes, Ministry of Economics, they're great guys. They've developed this draft legislation, which is integrated, which is very exhaustive, and the Russian regions are now expecting for the final decision on financing. But I would like to say that before implement this document, or as it will be implemented, we have to create a level playing field for the Russian regions. The regions are different, with different capabilities, budgetary capabilities, and now the region of Novgorod, like many other regions, they do have an agreement with the Ministry of Economics, and according to which we cannot take loans and to get any additional quick revenues from new companies would not be possible within the next 3 to 5 years. So we have a problem with financing of the small business infrastructure, which is quite capital intensive. We've had this policy from the previous governor that we would not invest in such infrastructure facilities as business incubators, techno parks, industrial parks. If you look at the neighboring regions, the Pskov, Tver region, Leningrad region, Vologda region, basically in all the region, these kind of infrastructure facilities are available, even more than one. Now, in Novgorod region, we have 0 for all class of these venues. And our financial capabilities do not enable us to invest the regional money. Yes, of course, we have the co-financing by the Ministry from Economics. It's 77 to 23%, the breakdown. But when we try to finance a business incubator in 2017, it was mostly for the facilities which were in the high degree of completion. Here, it just didn't work out. And our understanding in these new documents of how it's going to be in the future, we do not have this understanding. And therefore, my recommendation for the Ministry of Economics, please think about that. And please notice, maybe, I don't know, maybe a separate event for the regions. For those regions who do not have enough infrastructure, or they have no infrastructure, please level up this situation by the infrastructure, and then let the regions compete by tax, by their business, doing business ratings. This is the first thing I wanted to say about. And the second thing would be the tax regulation and how important it is to business. As a person who was involved in business, I can say, yes, it is important. And based on my communication with the business community right now, it still remains important. We are always fighting with illegal salaries payments because the tax on the wage fund is very high, 30%. The taxes for entrepreneurs, in terms of them making a decision to grow or not to grow, is very important as a factor. And I would like to introduce and to reconsider not the general taxation issue, but those subsystems where the small business is working. It's a simplified taxation system, imputed taxation, and patent. What are the regional instruments? How can we change it and to make some tax preferences? As for the simplified taxation mode, we can decrease from 6% to 1% if people are on simplified taxation plan. We've done it for a certain manufacturing companies, for those companies which are involved in the tourism area. If we are speaking about the two other systems, for example, patent, when companies buy one patent, it's a one-off purchase. Yes, we have a right to regulate the basic revenue level in terms of where the company is working. But to expand the kinds of businesses which could apply the patent kind of taxation, we cannot do it. But those taxes which we receive from the patent and others, these are regional or municipal. They go to our budget. So what I'm trying to say, I believe that we have to enable the regions for the taxes which they receive into their budgets. We have to give them greater freedom. Greater freedom for regulation, greater freedom for example, for issuing patents. They could expand the types of activities or tax breaks. If we speak about the Novgorod region, the number of beginner businessmen who applied for tax breaks, very few, dozens of companies, they're very few. Why is this happening? I believe that this is happening because those companies which can apply these tax breaks, there are a lot of limitations. I will not be listing all these limitations. It's a certain system of taxation in certain kinds of activities. And if the region could add let's say, like tourism, and those businessmen would also be liable for tax breaks, this would be an incentive to attract them into this new activity type. So please pay attention to this instrument, which is instrument of the tax regulation, which forms our tax base. And that's it for me. Opora, the Russian small business support entity, has always been working for you and defending you, because the small business is always working on the small territory. We believe that these taxes have to go to the municipal budgets. We're not taking this money. They're now in the shadow. And it's quite logical that where the self-employed people have their propiska or permanent registration, they have to pay the taxes where they live, locally. This would be fair. Let's see how discussion will evolve, but definitely it will be municipal and regional tax, not a federal tax. And you've made digression speaking about municipalities. We have Vyacheslav Zhilin, the head of the Zlatoust city district. What is your vision? I've heard that you have some regulatory issues. You have some regulatory issues which impedes regions from participating in federal measures, which limits them. They're limited in their tax maneuvering, so to speak. But you, as municipality, you're even better. You have less power to use different mechanisms for supporting small business SMEs. What can be done on a municipal level, and what Russian Ministry of Economics or a state corporation can help you with? Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I'm the head of the city of Zlatoust. The city of Zlatoust is the old industrial town which previously employed 3 big companies, town-forming companies, 30 to 50,000 people in each. They've been working for defense industry, for the space exploration. Now we have 2 companies which employ 8,000 people. 82,000 people are employed, and all others would be the small and medium business. 32 are small businesses, 32,000 people, 52%. And this is what we get as a local taxation from the SMEs. I largely agree with my colleague, which has been mentioned by the previous speaker, because given our budgetary system, we all basically are in deficit. We do not have the right, without the consent of the region, without the agreement of the higher-ups, to give preferences on the local level. Even tax collection is not that great in our region. We don't have much flexibility, and these events, they are fiscal measures, because if it's shortfalls from the budget, it's your problem on the local level. What can be done? I've heard my colleagues saying that, yes, there are some big programs and work on the federal level, on the level of ministries and the regions to help SMEs. In the city of Zlatoust, we have the territory of business, we have the multifunctional center, single shop-stop window, and we've given the loans for 7% per annum for certain small companies, and we work with the regional fund, 1% financing that small businesses can get. On one hand, we have money. But on the other hand, frankly speaking, it is very difficult to get the money. But money is not important. See what is going on with resources. 87% within our city, the land, are in the state foundation, with 9% are in the circulation. I can give an example. One of my colleagues is working in a company. They have to work. It's a former vegetable storage, like warehouse, and they have the big mechanical details that they're doing. They're taken off the roof by the crane, then unload and offload the big size details, because we're limited in the space. We're limited in our lands, where you can build something, and that property, Bulat factory, which has been demolished, they have 45 hectares, about 25 acres. There is no mechanism which would enable us to get the land and to own this land, although we've had experience when a certain individual was head of the Rosimущество, a Russian property supervision authority, and we got some lands into the circulation. The law which has been adopted, which enables the possibility to privatize the land for those who rent the land. There is a possibility of privatization. Yes, we have an entrepreneur who invested 82 million, Mr. Smirnov. He was denied his privatization of the federal property on this site. Why? Because he's building the economics of this federal unitary enterprise. There is nothing. It has to be just raised, bulldozed, and then this land has to be sold off on the market. It's a serious limitation. We have the public lands, we have the state lands, we have defended the Skolkovo plant. We want to build innovation park. It's a swamp, it's a marshy place. But we are forced to take the other land to keep the balance within our cartography. And I believe that in this respect, if these lands are within the borders of the settlements and the cities, they have to, there should be a separate way of rededicating them into different categories. And this is what is stagnating and does not let us to develop. What else I would like to say? What happens on the level of federations, on the level of regions? Basically, working here, you create very good and fertile soil, fertile ground, so to speak, which will give result. Why the Dutch people are champions? They have selection process. I've been speaking about that. Now, what do we have as a result? When my son is finishing up his school, what kind of competences he has? Can he become an entrepreneur? That's a question. What kind of basic knowledge he has? You know, this is a serious question. Now he's studying mathematics, he's studying foreign languages, and he does not even do any classes on financial management. So the question of selection begins from the high school, from the preschool. We are teaching our kids wrong stuff. We're getting ready for them resources, money, programs, and then one exception from the rule. Zlatoust is an industrial city, and through generations, people worked at factories. Through generations, they were thinking their kids, like metallurgist's son, will work in metallurgist kind of location. They have the mentality. They are not prone to be businessmen. But life has changing us, and I believe that when we speak about the Ministry of Economics, you have to reconsider it. We have to have special classes in high schools about business and economics. We are monitoring the guys who are graduating. They are usually going to go to the Ministry of Defense and physical mathematical block of subjects. For 200 years we've been working with weapons, and when we have a class on metal processing and producing the engraving on the steel, 80% of them, they want to work in this profile. It's also a serious problem, and without solving this problem, yes, your initiatives, they give effect, but not as positive benefit which we could have in the future. We have to speak about that professionally. We are also looking at that. There is no one general approach, but we believe that we have to get our kids ready for the new life. They have to understand how the money works, because without this, they will not achieve success. These are the main things I would like to highlight, and generally, as I believe, to do focus groups, to accept the support measures on the level of Russian municipalities. We can be involved in that, and we actually were ranked #1 in terms of investment support for the small and medium business. And I believe that we have been very efficient with Alexander Braverman. His first deputy is here. We got the land through the tradings help, thanks to the help of the ed. Also, we got the loan in Sberbank. We are launching the project of 2 billion rubles. It's also your child, which we've had together. We are working solidly on the ground. We are seeing the very big challenge which the president and the governors are giving us, but many pieces of the puzzle do not fit together, even in terms of the Federal Law 44 and the equal access to the money by the SMEs. This is the situation when a company having a manager and then they outsource an accountant, outsource some technical staff. They win the tender for 500 millions, and then they run around the city and give back to the small businesses by 20%. They get these little crumbles. And what quality of the project? What is the quality of the final project? They have to do it. But the quality is not there. 20 millions of margin they have taken. That's it. This is how the business works. This is the situation. Honestly, this is not looking super good. And we are going to have the presidium session with the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service on September 18th. Time does fly. Please come join us and share your experience. We believe that the price should not be the only factor when we speak about the legislation 223 and number 44. There's even a joke that for the day of the builder, there was a picture in social media. Breakfast of the general contractor. The guy is eating big caviar sandwich, and the contractor is eating just croutons on a plate. We have a problem. I got it, and I'm kindly asking you, can I finalize? Can I just put the finishing touches? I want to say that the topic of agglomerations, which is discussed on the parallel venue, we also have the agglomeration, the URLs, which is being considered by the government. It also gives impetus for development, a push for development. It's the center of subcontracts, which you can use in small territories by complementing one another. We are looking at the experience of Republic of Tatarstan, which is a leader for us. And I believe that we can strengthen up and beef it up and give new growing points for the SMEs in small territories, because, of course, we are limited in our consumer market and financial resources. So the principle of agglomeration is quite a big vector of development for us. Thank you. And I would ask Milena Aslanova to comment these two presentations. We've heard the federal authorities and municipal authorities. The questions which have been raised now, they are very relevant. I have to say that they are already reflected in the national projects. When we speak about the industrial parks, when we were thinking about the financing of the 129 parks for 6 years, we had certain criteria. And we assume that the funds will be channeled to those regions which have no infrastructure whatsoever. In this regard, Novgorod region will be one of our priorities. Number 2, the second criteria, as it was mentioned by the president, part of the funds will be spent for subsidizing the rental rates for those venues and facilities where companies do not have techno parks or industrial parks, but where they have industrial zones in municipalities and industrial facilities. If the rental rates will be very high, we can subsidize those rental rates for these companies. Also, among our priorities when you speak about the building parks. These would be the parks which are already being built at some brownfields or neglected industrial facilities. If Novgorod region has these kind of facilities, this is exactly what we will be working with. And another priority is financing those facilities which have certain drawings and specifications. You guys can send us your application. As for the including in our educational sphere, schools, institutions, colleges, or any courses for entrepreneurship, we do ardently support it. As for popularization, we are aiming at one of our targets groups, which will be the teenagers and younger generation, this category of citizen. We are pinning big hopes on them. I'm not sure about the preschool, that we need to work with the preschool about financial literacy, but I will try to come into the high school. There'll be a center for the youth activities, so-called centers for the youth engineering activities. They're called SMITs. And so I'm confident that you'll feel the result when we'll start implementing these projects with Opora of Russia. You will feel the dynamic of these endeavors. Milena, one outstanding example is, you know, that thanks to the stance of the Opora Russia and Ministry of Economics, we were able to promote privatization for the legislation 159. This is about the property of the municipalities, but also we were able, joined with you, to pass a legislation which has been adopted, that this kind of privatization could also be extended to the federal property. Vyacheslav Zhilin is sharing a situation in his downtown. He has the huge unitary enterprise sphere, I think, the Ekran, or a screen, federal unitary enterprise, 45 hectares. It was industrial site, it was former factory. There are 6 renters. We also have our municipal property, which we want to put into circulation. 6 renters. One of them has really invested heavily in capital construction. He has been trying for a long time to buy it. He was even getting some guarantees to do the buyback of these properties. But of course, the unitary enterprise is not interested because they get the money from this guy, because he's renting these facilities from the unitary enterprise. So it's a big complex of the real estate which has been pulled in different sides. You have railways, you have all sorts of infrastructure. It was awarded the GUP, or State Unitary Enterprise status. And we're taking 2 tunnels, 1 kilometer long. We are speaking about handing it over to municipalities, because we need these tunnels. We need to think about the maintenance. It's a common practice and the trend which we are seeing in Russia today. So, and this kind of system and these kind of companies, they are plenty, I believe, in Novgorod region and all over Russia. We have unitary enterprises which have long been producing nothing. They are huge lands. It's a federal property. They have CEOs and CEOs who want this company not to be privatized, not to be handed over to anybody, because they have the small economics and small finances, but this is the finances of these CEOs. It's a systemic issue.
Our business
For SMEs specifically within municipalities, and I think that probably we could do some kind of a display specifically for Rosimущество, for this kind of enterprise. In this sense, we will be able to walk step by step. I understand why we actually have tens of enterprises, but it's difficult to enterprise them because they have a lot of different accesses and nothing has been done about that for tens of years. I'm not going to speak for Rosimущество, but I saw not long ago on TV that the first entity of MSC actually managed to privatize that. Yes, a part of the property. As far as I know, we do have such a task, and we wanted to minimize the number of federal state unitary enterprise. Of course, it will take time. It's more a question for Rosimущество, but we actually go hand in hand together for that matter. And of course, SMEs that will be prioritized, specifically those entities entities that have been there for quite a while. Vyacheslav, you can actually will have an opportunity to address this issue to the minister, and we are waiting for Mr. Oreshkov for the plenary session that is scheduled for 1:30. You will have a chance to discuss that with him. You know, we need to understand the situation because this enterprise is located within an energy sector with all the pipelines and all this, you know, life support lines like gas supply, etc. Basically, we can say that we are losing what we used to have. Previously, when the state tried to enter that sector, they had workshops with all these machines, processing lines, etc. So if you walk there now, then you will see no machines, no workshops, etc. It seems like that it's, or it looks like Berlin back in 1945, and of course this is a serious problem. Thank you very much. Yes, I also wanted to extrapolate a little bit on that. The question is, why do we teach different technical subjects at school, but people know nothing about taxes? Why we must pay them? Why they know nothing about interest rates? They don't know what stands for labor code, what requirements you must comply with if you want to hire someone. But actually, you know that people are entitled to a job when they turn 14. It's a part of our legislation. This is a right that's prescribed for every single person. So during the one of the sessions, but the monitoring commission, we raised these questions together with Mr. Putin and Prime Minister Medvedev. We know that there are some governors who decided not to take a wait-and-see approach, and thus, for example, the governor of the Ulyanovsk region, Morozov, it's his birthday today, by the way. He spent the whole summer working on that issue, so they implemented a new standard for all the schools, and now they teach entrepreneurship basics at every school. That's exactly what we plan to do in Chelyabinsk, together with Mr. Dubrovsky. We could also apply the same practice in Nizhny Novgorod, since the Ulyanovsk region has already been exposed to that practice, and now they know everything about certification for all this curriculum, etc. Now we can take a part of the materials that have already been processed and take a big step forward in other regions. I think that Mr. Nikitin is one of the supporters of such approach, and he can also give it a try and apply the same strategy in Nizhny Novgorod. We know that Russians never tried to avoid the so-called creative solutions. We have always had this kind of intake for entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial spirit, and since we really have a space for that, that is really fantastic. If we start to teach kids at school these subjects, then we will have a lot of graduates who can work for companies with decent entrepreneurial backgrounds, and even if they decide to serve in the army or to choose something else, still they will have this background, and that's really great. So they will be able to dig deeper into this matter, and that's really great. Timur Madelinov, head of the Center for Research and Service. You listen to different blogs and workshops about business. You also know a lot about our main regulator-in-chief for economic development. Please, over to you. Thank you very much. Well, in fact, I represent the Analytical Center MFE, and I am amongst those who has already heard the voice of entrepreneurs many times. We have been working in that domain for 10 years, and based on our interviews, etc., we can say that there is a big number of different stories, just like those that were shared with us today by our colleagues, that on one hand can be considered as a claim, but it can also be regarded as a foundation for further actions and suggestions. You know, after what I have heard today, I would like to draw your attention to one very important point. When we write national strategies or regional programs for entrepreneurial development, we must take into consideration one very, delicate, structured cognitive aspect as comfort. It's not easy to describe that. I am fresh from vacation and I was flying from Munich, and I just saw those, chairs that they give to Russian representative of the customs service and German customs service. They are absolutely different. We use just ordinary uncomfortable chairs, which cannot be compared from the point of view of comfort with convenience, with the one that they used in Germany. So it might be written really cool and can really look cool on the paper, and Russia is really good at that. But as for the practice and as for the convenience, yes, we can say that we do pretty much the same thing, we work, etc. But for some reason, Mercedes do it better. They can manufacture more convenient cars, and the consumer, they feel this difference and they are willing to pay for Mercedes. Based on what's have been said today, I would like to wish all of you to consider this very important point in your works. The state can hardly take it into consideration, and of course it wasn't the case back in Soviet times. Russia was based on the heritage of the Soviet Union, and that's exactly what explained this phenomena. But when we listen to different entrepreneurial or entrepreneurship forums, etc., in the regions, we talk to youngsters and ask them to describe their participation in forums. So what do you think? What is the word that they used most often? And the situation is pretty much the same in the region. So they say it's all about the same, too formal, etc. We are talking about integration of new curriculum at schools, but who's going to do that? Entrepreneurs? No, it's going to be just another teacher. They pick somebody up and tell them to do that. Yes, we do have, for example, financial literacy course, etc. We also want to apply the same strategy in schools, but who's going to do that? Ex-labor or ex-environment protection, etc. Teacher can do that. That's exactly what they will do in practice. So they will use the same teachers and just change the dressing or change the souls, as we also put it, and tell them to teach those subjects, or take any other subject. It's also the case with the information technologies, etc. Now kids know much more than those teachers do. It's the situation is said that the world is changing, and we know that still we can do a lot. And even though that tractors they were invented a long time ago, still they had the tools, they had the motivation to create such a product, because they could really think long term and understand what it is going to be of great importance in future. But we shouldn't be too formal. That is why I would like to take such things as convenience into consideration when you create something when you work in this sphere. Since we represent analytical center and we work with a lot of figures, that is why I couldn't. I wanted to use some figures, but I couldn't fit them in one presentation. But still, I prepared a presentation that's dedicated to entrepreneurial climate, very important issue, very interesting one. So we wanted to on one hand, remember that this section is about future, but at the same time, we wanted to analyze some of the challenges that entrepreneurs are exposed to today. I would like to go through all of them very quickly. One of the indices today in Russia that can help us to keep track of the current state of business, that's what we're doing together with the Munich University, is the business index climate that considers two aspects. The first one is assessment of the current situation and also expectation for the near future. Usually it's a 3-year-long period. The scale is from 100 to 0 to 100, so now it falls within a range of 25 points, which is really good. In some countries it's even worse, but the situation is really great. Right now, 39% of entrepreneurs, medium-sized enterprises, they are very positive in terms of their evaluation. And we also ask them, what do you think, what are the main problems for the business today that prevent any further development for the business? Here are the 5 main problems. They are more of operating or operational nature. This top 5 has been the same over the past 4 or 5 years. So it's always about taxes, lack of competent specialists, competition with shadow sector, and at the same time the first challenge here is the low level of financial literacy, entrepreneurial literacy, some pessimism, etc. Of course, I agree with my colleagues who say that it's absolutely normal, because how can we actually increase it? Because we do have this Soviet heritage with its capitalism, etc. And now we can say that we have the first generation of entrepreneurs, that they are growing in size, and the financial literacy is improving, of course, but as a result, they take all the decisions on their own. But when we talk about a big corporation, it's always a collective decision making. But it all starts with one single person who takes the final decision at the end of the day. And of course, it takes literacy, it takes personal financial literacy, etc., awareness. And we know that 77% of the entrepreneurs make financial plans for a year to come. It's a real catastrophe from the official financial plan, and it means that every 4th enterprise use paper to keep track of all the financial indicators and do accounting and reports. So it actually reflects lack of understanding of all the process within the enterprise, and as a result, 37% have a problem with the cash gap. Hence the question, what kind of question we might have that can be derived from this lack of awareness. Yes, they don't understand what stands for the word leasing and its essence. They don't know how factoring works. They are risking to have problems and mistakes with estimations, calculations, etc. Another problem is the so-called information vacuum. When we conduct conducted and service in European capitals and in Moscow as to how they launch business there. And I was personally directing opening some of the businesses in Moscow, just like my partners in Europe. Of course, no doubt, right now we just need to take your documents to the tax service. And you know, when I was about to open my enterprise, I went to the tax service and I received like 15 calls from different companies who provided me with a whole variety of different offers, like accounting services, personal data protection services, etc. I will share some more examples with you later on, but a very important thing is that we should get ready to create business from the very beginning. But we are not always ready to do that because we're just a new generation of entrepreneurs. But once we decide to do that, we don't have all the needed support to grow. This information really is really missing. We need consultants, we need some data, etc. That's, for example, one in two entrepreneurs who is denied credit is given no explanation why it actually happened, and 64% of entrepreneurs know nothing about any state support that is officially provided for entrepreneurs.
We have the special index, which is called the Business Ready for Transformation Index. We are evaluating their digital infrastructure, if they're investing in IT. 78% of companies are not planning to boost expenses on IT. Only 7% of businessmen have trained their employees in IT, usually IT professionals, accounting office, and others. And digitization, as we understand it, it's a drastic change of a business model. I'm sorry for maybe being too joking. It's this kind of bundle that have to be unbundled. And since the topic has been identified, what steps have to be taken given these three challenges, here I maybe very abstractly have written the solutions. And how do we see the solutions? Challenge number one we have been discussing today is financial literacy of people. The spirit of capitalism, according to Protestant ethics by Max Weber. Of course, we need to build and develop this spirit. How can we develop this spirit? It's a complex issue. It's a difficult issue. And this is working with a school curricula, as other colleagues have mentioned, entrepreneurships and financial literacy. But I also would like to avoid this very formal approach. The second point, when we speak about IT support, is neonatal support. You all know the life span of an average small companies. Most of them are being closed in the first year, in 2 years. It is very important to take this baby infant, this business infant, and to carry this infant, which is the small or micro business, until they will stand on their feet and start walking or running. Yes, we have done the process of opening companies, closing the companies. Well, it is difficult to close a company still, but now you can open a company in 45 minutes. It's very quick. But as for support, we're lacking this support. But in other countries where we've been trying to do that, it's very difficult. It's difficult to formally describe it. You send a booklet at home, you can get any consultation, you can get it. It's very easy, very light. What we offer to entrepreneurs right now, can you do it? Okay, if you cannot do it, it's tough for you. It's the same if you throw an infant, like whether they survive or not survive, like a natural selection in the jungles, which is bad. If you want to grow and nurture business, we have to put them into the different environment. But the digitization leads to transparency, which makes them to rebuild their business processes. Unfortunately, the economy is such that most of the companies in Russia are the trading companies. We have online cash machines, and now the entrepreneurs are legal. They have to issue the checks. Of course, there is a mass of problems, but now they've built their process is transparent, and the first stream is those who were able to rebuild, to adapt using this digitization, and others simply cannot survive. They do not know how to work legally, how to issue the salaries legally, how they can use all of these, how it can exist totally legally, 100% legally. And we've done a research about the cash machine or cash reform. And we have the very clear proportion or dependency, two indicators. Number one would be the attitude to the reform, and the second indicator is knowledge of the reform. And the less people know why it is done, the worse is their attitude. Why? Because who explained to entrepreneurs why do we need to do that? Who is teaching them how to behave? I'm not even mentioning about the tax benefits and others. Very few people know about that. And when people do not know why they need to do this, they have a negative attitude, and they do not know why people are bugging me, why tax authorities are asking for even more tax, and they have a negative stance on that. And the business climate is unfortunately getting only worse. Thank you. Thank you for taking such a long time in my presentation. Thank you, Timur. You've identified some aspects. You gave us some analytical report. And one thing that I will allow myself to disagree with you, that you are setting this question, who is going to teach? If we set this kind of question, then we will never set the right question. Who is the first, the horse or the cart? The digitization, when the companies created themselves, it enables you not to teach yourself, but to monitor, put up on the monitor those great lectures and those great presenters that we have. We can use different digital platforms like Delovaya Sreda by Sberbank. Jointly with Ministry of Economics, they've spent 1 billion rubles, and they've loaded it with the best content. They have written out all the cycles of development of any company in any country of the world. And this could be the Google-based programs. This could be our best business trainers and coaches. The only thing we need is the will and the accreditation of this program for the students. Even the labor class teacher, in this case, if he or she has the right culture, they could be a moderator. They could be this kind of assembly point of what we have on the internet, aggregator of what's available on the internet, but it takes political will on the level of the regions. Dear colleagues, we are finishing up this session. We have Andrei Shubin here with us. You are head of the Opora Россия business support agency. You have the regional offices, but in terms of the total mass of the entrepreneurs in our country, what are the impulses, what are the drivers that could be given to the business community? Yeah, there are different impulses or different drivers depending on the region. If I speak about the far east of Russia, this would be supervising authorities and excessive demands for doing business, excessive barriers. We know how many requirements are given to the small businesses. You know, what's important is to decrease the number of excessive regulators and regulations, which are colossal. Another factor is competition. But who the small business is competing with? They're competing with the state, with the government, with the state unitary companies and enterprises. Calculate the state unitary enterprises. We have 24,000. Number of municipalities is about the same. So doing the simple math, we believe that at each competitive market, in each municipality, there is a unitary enterprise. This is the money of taxpayers, which are engaged in unitary enterprise, state unitary enterprise, which are killing micro and small business. One example, Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk. The MOP, or the local municipal enterprise, they've did some landscape for 60 million rubles. Prior to that, 4 companies were winning tenders for landscape in the city. You know what the amount was? 20 million rubles. That's the answer for you. So unfair competition. We need to cut down the public sector on these competitive markets. Once again, on the highly competitive markets would be one of the most important problems that entrepreneurs are dealing with. May I comment this, please? May I give a comment to what has been said? You are correct. I'm the head of the municipality. I also have the MBU or MUMPS or the Municipal State Unitary Enterprises. You've given us examples. We've been trading. We've been... We did this landscaping, land improvement, and the small medium companies came and they dropped so much. We simply lost it. We failed our contracts. Let me finish. I've created MBU, and I have to deal with it because let me respond to you immediately. Let me respond to you right away. There was a conference for competition with the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service. You simply fire those people who are building tech specifications for those works, because we and tax office are made in experiments in landscaping, and we've taken one field. It's a cleaning services facility. We've calculated a tax burden, which has to be real if you want to work white or to work fully legal. We built the contract formula, the price formula for us to understand that the person, they got this medical record book, they built all the fees and stuff, and they paid all the thing. No state customer understand it now. And their main criteria in the competition is the price, not quality. Not quality, which has to be a part of the tech assignment when you prepare the documents for the competition. It's another story. We're saying on one hand, okay, let's all work fully legal. Okay, great. Immediately, the state corporations and the public clients are simply setting up for a tender. The price is number one. This is the answer. This is the answer. Timur, I would say that yes, Andrei is right. You absolutely have to build an issue of monopoly into 3 blocks. We see that the competitive markets are shrinking. We can see that the public-run companies are coming into the public utility sectors. And the block number 4, point number 4 is market monopolization, which is impeding the growth of the small business. Dear colleagues, we are very precise. We are done. We're right on time. Thank you very much for involvement in our session. We are breaking for lunchtime now, provided by the Moscow Mayor's office, and the plenary session with the leading ministries of our country.
Полиаритомия делает такие. Это вот сделано, это гравировано стали руками наших мастеров. Это наши медали, которые мы получили с учреждения оружейной академии. Добрый день. Поэтому вот тебе на память из Златоуста земляков.
Спасибо.
Давай, спасибо, что пригласил работать.
Да. У вас, если будут вопросы, приезжай. 18 числа у нас будет Спас президент.
Да, я тебе позвоню как раз вот по тем вопросам, которые были по отдельному министерству. Хорошо?
Да. Угу. Вот передай только обязательно благодарность. Да,
Кресинскую почему еще нет информации? Ну, есть она, но она не подтверждена. Конечно.